welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta.
And I'm Connie. And today we are here with Bobby Hedglin-Taylor. So, Bobby, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you deal when shit gets real.
Oh, man. Well, my entire life is about the shit getting real. So it's a perfect topic. So by trade, I was a professional trapeze artist. Started out as a dancer in the 80s, became a circus trapeze artist shortly thereafter, toured the country in musicals and circus, and I've been in New York since the 80s as well. And then eventually started combining circus and aerial and theater together. And then I became what's called an aerial and circus sequence designer. So I design aerial sequences for musicals, shows, rock concerts.
That sounds amazing.
It's really fun.
I
worked with the band Fish. I don't know if you've heard of Fish, but I worked with them at Madison Square Garden twice. I flew to the roof of Madison Square Garden at 75 feet in the air at the Fish concerts. So that was really
cool.
We all have there's 18 people that were in that group. We have the hashtag best gig ever, and it still is like the top of my list of like the most incredible gigs of my life. And then I got to work on Broadway by training actors to do circus aerial skills. I trained a couple of actors to play Charlie Chaplin. One is Rob McClure, to walk a tightrope, because Charlie Chaplin did an entire film about the circus, and he learned to walk a tightrope in like a week. And for this film, for this one film. And then I trained Andrea Martin and Tova Feldshue and Patina Miller for the musical Pippin, and I taught them all trapeze. And that's what I do now. I just came back from a site visit for a theater that we're putting up a new musical in January that's possibly coming to Broadway next year. So that's the kind of stuff I do. Plus I have regular students who are just looking for recreational activity alternative to the gym. The other spin was during COVID, I lost my mom. She was one of the first people to die during the beginning of the pandemic. The next day after she died, I caught COVID. So I was stuck. We were all stuck in quarantine. So like I was mentioning to you in our pre-interview, nobody really has a trapeze in their living room. What else can I do but write? And I had no access to therapy. So I started to write about my mom, and I wrote about family. So I wrote 2 books over the course of the pandemic. And then just as the pandemic ended and we started to reopen New York City, my doctor said, well, it's time for you to get hip replacement. And I'm like, shit
man.
just got real.
Oh, no.
So I am 3 months from my surgery date. So I'm doing great. No pain. It's the most incredible feeling ever.
That's awesome.
To not have to walk with a cane. I'm only in my 50s. I'm not like a rickety old man, but I was looking like one. So now I can exercise and stuff. And and so through all the pandemic, I also was able to entertain. I do a lot of stand-up comedy, and I also do a lot of impressions, and I do impression singing and things like that.
So cool.
I was paid to do that during the pandemic, so it got me a chance to be a different type of an artist. So the shit got real, so I just pivoted.
Changed.
You have no choice but to pivot. Otherwise, you're going to just sit watching Netflix. And that's pretty much what I was doing, was watching Netflix getting fat. And then I just started to say, this is not me. This is not who I am. Yes, we're in quarantine, but what can I do that's artistic? And then I started to write, and before my mother passed, she was going back and forth to the emergency room, and she was living in a nursing home. So I would go sit with her when she was in the ER, because she had dementia. She didn't really know what was going on sometimes, but she knew me and she was comfortable with me. So she would cooperate with the nurses and doctors, and I could at least be there to advocate for her.
We understand dementia. Our grandfather had dementia pretty bad, so we understand how difficult that can be.
Oh yeah. And so she started to tell stories, and it wasn't that they were, and I checked the stories out with other relatives. I was like, did mom actually tell you this story? Was I really conceived on a beaver dam? And they're like, nope, your mom told me that story. And I'm like, oh God. So I was there with her, and she would just sort of rattle these stories off. And I had my computer with me, because we were still working during that time period, and it was before the pandemic. So I would I'd take notes, and then I would start to expand on the story and just started to write it. But it didn't really, I didn't really know what it was about until after she passed. And then it was just like, this is the greatest gift that she's given me, is the gift of laughter. And it was her way of coping with every situation, was that she was a funny lady, and she made people laugh in order to cope with whatever situation they were going in. And then as I looked back at my memories from when I was a kid, my mother would be the one poking us in the ribs in church, trying to get us to laugh. And when we're like, Mom, stop it, you're going to get into trouble, we're going to get thrown out of church, but that was who she was. And that's what I wanted to capture. So the first book that I just published is called Shit My Mama Says. And
I love that title.
Yeah, it's actually documentary filmmaker of sorts with my mom, because I was sitting there and I would videotape her, because I knew it was the end. I knew it was like, she's not going to be here forever. I thought we would have more time together when she first went into the hospital, and then she came home from the hospital. She was at the nursing home when she passed. So I thought, well, she's bouncing back all the time. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have more time. And then it was, we get a
How old was she?
She would have been, well, at the time she was 82, but she will be, August 7th is her birthday. So I'm doing my book launch on August 7th as a memento and sort of like an honor to her.
I love that.
It's the best way to, her actual funeral is August 14th, because we didn't have a chance to have a funeral for her.
Oh, gosh.
We lost 6 relatives during the pandemic.
Oh my God.
So it was my mother and her sister and my other aunt's husband. So we are interring my mom's ashes next to my dad in Pennsylvania on August 14th. Yeah, so finally the family will get together. We'll have a, Italian feast, because we're all, an Italian family. What do? You eat. Food is part. And the second book that I wrote during the pandemic is a cookbook. And it's actually, I compiled not just the stories about my mom, but stories about growing up with my grandmother. My grandmother was very Sicilian, little tiny Italian lady, always had a sweater and a black skirt just in case a funeral was in town. And so she was just like this little spitfire, and I lived with her in the 70s, so I learned all about cooking, cleaning, sewing, and making pasta.
Love it.
And so
That's
all
awesome.
of those stories came back, and and I began to compile the recipes, and then in the process I made up my own versions of the recipe. And then when I found that other people in my life have different dietary needs, I was like, well, what if I give this book to my cousin Kara? She's a vegan. She can't have my bolognese. So I made a vegan bolognese. So I every recipe that contains meat has a gluten-free option, a vegan option, and a vegetarian option. So people can
That's awesome.
So there's like
Love
a base recipe, and then you pick and choose your poison, So
I love it.
I'll stick with the bacon and the pancetta, but if you want to,
Same.
It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about family, and the memories that came back were just magic. And they really, the story, my first words, that story made me laugh the most, because my first words were fucking reindeer. Those were my first words. And I remember my mother telling me the story, and I was like, I've got to put this in the book somewhere. I've got to.
Oh my gosh.
You absolutely have to include that. Yeah.
So in the process, that was how both books came about. And Shit My Mama Says I had to get published first, because I want to put one of my books in my mother's ash vault for forever. So that
it's got to be with her.
Sweet.
Yeah. I'm not, and it's not, the memorial service is not about me. It's not about my book. It's about my mom, and it's about her sisters. And so I want to just like, that's my gift to her, and sharing her with everybody, because she was a very funny person.
You can't do a better gift than that, honestly.
Yep.
I encourage people to write whatever you can, whenever you can. Use your phone, use auto dictation on your phone. I wrote a lot of my books on my phone, because the story was coming, but I couldn't type fast enough. And you have to remember, though, that autocorrect has a
problem.
Humor. Yeah, someone calls it autocock.
But ain't that the truth?
For the one story, a good friend of mine, we were actually tweeting on Twitter back and forth, and she was like, I'm in my 60s. I want to do a Broadway musical. I want to do a musical again. I haven't done musicals in a while. What's something that's age appropriate? So I sent her a tweet, and I said, well, look at the musical Ballroom. It's about a middle-aged woman who loses her husband and finds romance in a ballroom. And I said, it's right in your vocal range. You can dance it. You're a good dancer. And then her response was, oh my God, what a coincidence. I have that scrotum on my nightstand. Are you sure? Usually we don't leave those out. Do you want to put it in the refrigerator? So they go stale and get vinegary. She meant script. The one thing that's really funny is that whenever autocorrect jumps in, that's why I call it autocock, is because she had to have written the word scrotum in her phone several times for it to autocorrect script. Just saying.
Well, yeah. Oh my goodness. Your cookbook just reminds me, like, we had an episode where we talked about like our grandmother's recipes and stuff. And it's something that we should eventually do, because she is also, like your mom, a Spitfire, a little hellion on wheels at the age of 91. Yeah. She's still like, I don't care. Like, I'll do what I want. Like, please.
Your grandmother's Eric Cartman. I do what I want.
Basically, she really is.
She also went to Vegas. She also went to Florida twice. Like, she's just been everywhere.
I applaud the people that were able to get out and get around. It was just like, I was talking to a friend in Indiana, and she lives pretty remotely in Indiana, and she was like, we have 0 cases here. I don't know what's going on or what you're talking about. I was like, there was a fucking a fire, the ambulances going past my house every 20 minutes from March to June of 2020. I live on a thoroughfare goes towards the hospital, and the funeral home on the corner had a refrigerator truck. Never had that before. Never watched a forklift lift a body into, or anything like that. So
yeah,
I was hit, we were hit pretty hard. And that's what I was saying to you before, that I really feel that even if you weren't hit hard, that's still 600,000 families that were suffering.
Oh yeah.
And that is there's definitely going to be a heavy PTSD cycle, and that's why like I said, that's why I started to write, because writing became therapy. And I figured, well, I can't, not working, not going to have access to therapy right now, can't afford it, but what can I do for myself?
Yeah. And I think our grandma was just like, psh, I'm 91. If this takes me, fine. Yeah. Like, that's literally her attitude, was just like, nah, whatever. It's fine. Yeah. If that happens, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So,
she's lived
like,
it was just a good life.
Her.
Yeah. She's lived a good life. She's okay with it.
But don't you think, though, that some people that have that kind of an attitude in general are the people that survive this kind of a thing? Because their immune system is listening.
Yes.
Like their immune system's like, well, fuck it. I wish I had that attitude when I caught COVID, because I was sick for almost 2 months. It was
my goodness.
Horrible. Yeah. I was almost hospitalized, and, I don't, like there's not enough that's said in the world about your immune system. And after Mom passed, of course, we all have Facebook. So of course that was the way we were communicating. And I was vague booking, because I did not want to say I have COVID, and to make everybody nervous and
worry and whatever.
But also, I wasn't sure what was going on in our government and things like that in the city. I just didn't want to let anybody know anything until I was absolutely certain I was fine. And if I was going to be hospitalized, then I was going to say. But my friend Phoenix, she's like, something's up. You're not yourself. I know your mom just passed, but something's different. I said, yeah, I have COVID. I've been sick for about 2 weeks now, and I'm not getting any better. And she said, what's your mailing address? And the next morning, a box comes, and it is filled with these herbal remedies that boost your immune system.
I love it.
Within 3 days of taking those, one is called fire cider, another one is, there's literally, it was like
fire cider sounds delicious.
It actually is not. It tastes
it sounds like some like spicy cider. Like, I could get down with spicy cider if that's going to help my immune system. I'm just saying.
If you mix it with juice, you can mix it with apple juice, and it does taste much better. But it has got like garlic, horseradish.
Yeah, that's not what I was thinking that was in that.
Apple cider vinegar. I mean, but my immune system started to kick everything out.
Yeah.
And then I started to get better. And within about 2 to 3 more weeks after starting those herbs, I finally, no more fevers, no more headaches. no more nausea, no more chills, no more body aches. So it actually, whether it was a placebo or if the virus was on its way out already,
Yeah.
something in that worked. And,
Yeah.
So when I got that, and I was like, okay, this seems to help me. So when people would post on Facebook that they had COVID, I would send them the $40 immunity booster from this farm in upstate New York. And they all would get it. And they're like, this tastes horrible. I said, mix it with apple juice. You'll be fine. And then and they were like, oh, much better. And they all survived. They all got better. They all started to have a better response. Yeah,
it is.
And I just feel like, we've all heard those, everybody was like, oh, vitamin C, vitamin D, that's all they can do. Take Tylenol. And then, what are you doing to trigger your immune system to sort of fight this thing? So, like listening to your story about your grandma, I'm like, interview her, put her on your show, talk about.
We've talked about that actually.
We have, yeah.
Ask her and just tell her,
she's very low tech. So we would have to figure something.
You'd have to go over there and like do it at her house with her.
Or we would both have to be there and just record it.
Yeah.
All three of us would have to sit down.
That's the thing that, like, when I was sitting with Mom in the nursing home, it's like whenever I would visit her, we would talk anyway, and she would just sort of, go into her stories and things like that. But they were never the same story twice. She always was like, and so it was almost as if she was dictating the book to me. So, so like her catchy little pithy sayings are all in that book. And it's designed to give people a chuckle, when you're, like when you deal with someone who's dealing with dementia. They say some fucked up shit.
Oh,
they
do.
They do.
Oh,
they also do some fucked up shit too. So
I will never forget, not too long after our grandpa got diagnosed, I went home for Christmas and we were sitting down at the table and I sat next to my grandpa and he goes, "You're the prettiest thing I've seen in a long time." And my grandma goes, "Ferdinand, that's your granddaughter." And I'm like, "Grandma, it's fine. He doesn't know. Let him be."
Yeah. When my Aunt Elsie was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she called me Andrew, and she was like, "Andrew, will you tell that kid to stop running around the table?" Meanwhile, there's no kids in the building. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll be right at it. Charlie, stop it." And so we were just
like, sure.
You just have to humor them because the thing that I found that was the hardest is when you question their reality or when you bring them to reality, it shakes them in such a way that it's very sad. Because they realize that the person that they're talking about is either gone or, they don't have their home anymore or, somewhere in their thought process, they forgot that this person was gone. So you're like, "Oh, grandma's working late tonight. She's still at the restaurant." And that was the thing. Whatever she would talk about my grandma, I'd be like, "Oh, no, she's still at the restaurant, Mom. She'll come and visit you next week. Don't you remember her visiting last week?" "No, I don't." "Oh, she was here last week." The thing that I say in the book is, it would be smiles and laughs until the elevator door closed, because that's when I would lose it, because I would be holding on so quickly, so much so to keep that brave face, because you just don't want to upset them. They're already she was in a nursing home. Now, granted, it was not a bad place. It just wasn't home.
Right.
It felt like a hospital to her, and she felt like that she wanted to go home most of the time. And I would be like, "You'll come home soon," and then I was like, ugh.
That's why I told Grandma when she was trying to be like, "Ferdinand, that's your grand." I'm like, "Leave him alone. It's fine. If he thinks he's 18 and in the Navy again, let him be 18 and in the Navy again. It's okay."
Right.
So with the cookbook, where exactly did the name come from? And what is your favorite recipe out of that cookbook?
Oh, good question. So, yes, I was born in an Italian family on a mountaintop in Pennsylvania. Early in the 1940s, my great-grandfather and my grandfather bought a plot of land. And my great-grandfather had 13 children. My grandmother was the eldest of 13. They bought the other plots of land around my great-grandfather. So the entire top of this mountain, it was all relatives. And so it got the derogatory nickname of Ravioli Mountain because everyone was related and everyone was Italian. So, and only going back to escaping to Ravioli Mountain, did I realize that I'm going to recapture that derogatory term and turn it around and make it a fun fun thing, because that's where I learned how to make ravioli. That's where I learned how to make all that pasta. My favorite recipe was learning how to make gnocchi with my grandmother, and with a lemon butter sauce. It was the simplest thing
Ooh.
ever. She had two ways of making her gnocchi. Now, when she had guests coming over, she would actually boil potatoes, mash the potatoes, and do the recipe by the book with potatoes. When it was just her and I, she would take potato flakes and like regular instant mashed potatoes, and then throw them into the flour. Now, for me personally, I like the one with the instant mashed potatoes so much better, because it makes these light, puffy gnocchi. And then the lemon butter sauce is nothing more than garlic, capers, basil, white wine, and butter. Lots of butter. And that would be like the best thing. And it would be done 15, 20 minutes and dinner was on the table. But that was the one that I always was enamored with. But so with the
Sounds
book being
delicious.
called that, thank you. I grew up in a very, very weird environment, because everyone around me was related. So like my grandmother was on the left, my Uncle Billy was on the right, Uncle Frankie was across the street, great grandpa was across the street. So it was like I never had a neighbor that wasn't a relative until I moved to New York. And so being in that insular, like Italian Ianasport, for lack of better terms, it was very insular, because we looked out for each other. We shared recipes, we shared food. The funniest thing was everybody hunted deer up there, mostly because it would subsidize your meals for the winter. You could get a deer, and then you would have meat for the winter. So we'd hear gunshots. Then all the lights would black out across the street. The phone would ring, and it would be my Uncle Frankie, and it would be, you'd call my grandmother, Franny, I just got an 8-point buck. What do you want? You want the hind quarter? You want the shoulder? And then within like a day, this big chunk of deer in white butcher paper would come, and my grandmother would, slice it up into portions and put it in the freezer. But that's the way that we lived on the hill. It was, yes, highly dysfunctional. We're Italian. There's, if I put my hands behind my back, I can't talk, so it's like highly dysfunctional, but still everything was rooted in love. I used to love to climb trees, and my Aunt Shirley used to rat me out every time, because I'd be climbing the oak tree in the front of our house, and I'd be at the top of the tree, and I would fall asleep. And I would be asleep in the tree, and she would call my mother, and she's like, he's gonna fall and break his neck. Get him out of that fucking tree. So all these stories, when you lose someone close to you, you start to compile, the memories just flood you. And I would be up late at night, and I'd be like ready to go to bed. And I'm like, my first words were fucking reindeer. I got to write that story, and I would tell the story, I'd be writing the story about how my first words were Christmas in the 60s saying fucking reindeer, so that recipe. And then, the fact that there's so many dietary restrictions nowadays. I run a trapeze school, and I invite my staff over every now and then to have dinner. And some people are dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian. So each of the recipes that contain meat, I added vegetarian options, vegan options, and pescatarian options, so that people can make their own concoction that tastes similar to the bolognese or to the puttanesca, that kind of thing. Even my vegan puttanesca, people are raving about. Has no anchovies in it, but it tastes just like puttanesca sauce. So
awesome.
And ironically, my grandmother's best sauce is puttanesca, which literally means of the puttana, the woman of the night. Basically, the hookers were called puttanas. So puttanesca is the sauce of the putta.
Which also makes sense, because Spanish and Italian are close, and puta and Spanish.
You're right. Exactly. Oh my God, you just reminded me of a story. When I moved to New York, my first apartment was a whorehouse before I moved here.
I love it.
Yes. So this is an old New York story. So 41st and 9th Avenue is it was like Beirut in the 1980s. The doorbell would ring all night long, and we would, and then I'd go to the buzzer and hello, puta. Like, there's no fucking puta here. So I even ran down in my bathrobe naked, and I opened it and said, does this look like puta to you?
Oh my God.
Stop ringing my doorbell.
Exactly. But that was the funny part. When we found that apartment, the landlord was like, he hadn't had the building for almost 8 years because the building was confiscated because it was previously a whorehouse. He had rented it to a madam. That was New York. That was the 80s, but then when they,
Mm-hmm.
when they did away, when they figured out these illegal places were there, they raided them, shut them
Yeah.
down, but then he got the building back and then renovated, and it became an apartment. So I'm like, that was one of my first apartments in New York. But yeah, but that's again, grandma of all people has the best puttanesca sauce. So
Of
Of
course.
course.
yeah,
So going back to your trapeze, how did you get started in trapeze? I can't like maybe as a little kid I could imagine being like, oh, trapeze would be fun, but I wouldn't like how did you end up there?
it's very
As a
strange how it
career.
happened. Yeah, and as a career too. First of all, I came to New York as a dancer and as not as an acrobat, but as a dancer and as an actor. And my specialty was ballroom dance. So
Ooh.
all through the 80s, I was working at a restaurant very popular in the 80s called Mama Leone's, and an Italian restaurant. And so my ballroom dance partner and I would drive from Pennsylvania. We would dance in the restaurant to get people up to dance because they had an orchestra. And so I think we made $50 a week, and we would split that, and then we'd get tips. And the little old ladies were always pinching my butt. So
Love it.
so that was how I got. And I always wanted to be in New York. We've been coming to New York since the 70s. Even I have relatives here, family in Brooklyn. So the city was always part of my collective unconscious, and I always wanted to end up here. So then I started doing theater, mostly professional theater in the 80s, national tours, mostly Broadway musical type shows that were going out. I did one cruise ship and found that I was seasick all the time and couldn't finish the cruise ship, because that wasn't for me. And then I had been started bartending in between gigs. So a friend that I befriended was an old Broadway performer, and he was writing a new musical, and it was a circus version of a circus musical called The Circus Adventures of Toby Tyler. And he was like, you're perfect for it. You have the right voice. You have the right build. You have the right look. Do you have any circus skills? And I was like, no. So I didn't even know how to juggle at that point. So they found the only coach in New York City who would take us on. And so it was me and my understudy that started. And within 6 weeks, I was really jazzing. I really loved it. And it was just a new way to dance. And it was just freeing because I wasn't never afraid of heights. Obviously, I would climb trees and fall asleep in a tree, as a kid. So for me, it was just like home.
It's
And
natural.
and then the show did not happen because the investors pulled out. They put
Oh,
their money into
boo.
something else. Yeah, but pivot. Life gives you
Yeah.
lemons. Don't make lemonade. Make my grandmother's lemon tiramisu with limoncello. You
Ooh.
really that you get a chance to reinvent yourself. So I got a job working in a nightclub doing trapeze over the dance floor.
That's
And
fun.
so there were 6 people that were only the aerial acrobats in New York at the time. It was me and 5 ladies. Now, they were the most sought after. That's just normal in the nightclub scene. That's just at the time, go-go dancers were women. You wouldn't see a
Hmm.
Yeah.
lot of guys in the air. But when they were busy there were so many nightclubs, they would all get thrown around, and sometimes we'd have to jump from nightclub to nightclub and do 3 sets a night.
Hmm.
But I had to wait my turn, but I would eventually get a performing gig in the nightclubs. So I had that opportunity, and I had that chance to sort of perform every week, like every week, and make my rent in one week. You would never be able to do that in any other time period. But yeah, I would be able to come home with almost $1,500 in my pocket for one week's worth of work. And that would repeat itself over and over again. And then as the ladies got better and I got better, we got jobs outside of the city doing smaller shows. I did a tour of a magic show. I did a show in Vegas. I worked in a casino, so we got plunked out. And then for the summers when we weren't performing, we would do circus camps. People would hire us and really pay us well to teach aerials, tightrope, juggling, clowning, and all the stuff that we were already doing in our professional life. We would get paid really well to teach kids over the summer. So that started a whole other industry. And then it wasn't until I was I had moved to San Francisco because they had the best circus school in the country at the time. And it's still phenomenal circus school. I highly recommend the Circus Center. Um, I started training there, and then Grandma got sick, and I decided to move back to New York, and Grandma passed, and then I started to just sort of retire from the circus world. I was kind of done with it. I was sort of frustrated that I wasn't going further. I would always lose out on certain jobs because I wasn't in a circus family, which is a whole other issue. When you're not in a circus family back then, it was not always you weren't always treated well because you were considered taking a job away from somebody who had been
a
doing this for
family.
generations. So I totally understand that, but I needed a gig. I found a gig, so I also felt that I was ready to pivot. I was ready to do something new, and I didn't know what it was. And so I started coaching kids gymnastics. And that was sort of like it was right before 9/11. It was right around that time period. So I got really good at coaching kids gymnastics and recreational gymnastics. I was never a gymnast. I was taught how to tumble by the Mongolian horse riders that I toured with. The women were fascinated. They'd never seen a man with red hair. They'd only seen dyed hair. They never saw someone like me. So they were always ooh, redhead. And so they taught me how to tumble into a bale of hay. There was all this hay that we would tumble on. And so I learned basic tumbling, like backyard tumbling. And then when I came to New York and there wasn't a lot of circus going on, other things were happening, I started coaching gymnastics. And then I think it was around 2003, I was asked to do a musical that involved circus. And I was not only going to be in the show, I was going to be the swing, I was going to be the circus coach, and I was going to be the understudy for the lead. So I had all of these things come into one show. And it was the musical Barnum. And basically the musical Barnum tells P.T. Barnum's life through a circus. So it's song and dance, but like there's one point where P.T. Barnum left his wife for the opera singer Jenny Lind. And how do you do it theatrically? Instead of having him just leave, he has to walk a tightrope from his wife to his mistress at the end of Act One. So I had to do that, and I had to teach that as well. So that started to really get my theatrical brain moving again. And I did several productions of Barnum, several productions that other shows that involved putting aerial stuff into the show. And then before you know it, I became a circus and aerial sequence designer. And that's what I do in theater, Broadway shows, national tours, cruise ships, rock concerts. Like I said, one of the few people who've touched the roof of Madison Square Garden at a Fish concert. So that cool. Kind of stuff just sort of came to me all at once. And I learned a lot about what that is. When you're reading a play or a book, the story, you turn a page and there's another part of the story there in words. But on stage, you have to do it in movement. You have to do it in music. Sometimes you have to do it in the air. So just to give you an example, like I learned from one of my dear friends, Paul Rubin. He's called the Fly Guy. He's the guy who designed the flying for the musical Wicked. He's done like 20 Broadway shows where he is the guy who, visionary. But the musical Tarzan tells a story in one of the songs called Son of Man, where the young Tarzan has to grow up to be the young man Tarzan. How do you do that? You have baby Tarzan swing across the stage, and then in the back of the house, you have big Tarzan swing down to the stage, and you've just turned the page. So you've used the aerial sequence to tell the story. And that's what we both jived on. We both love doing that kind of stuff. We work together a lot. In fact, we're working on a new musical that's coming to Broadway next year. It's called Super You, and it's about female superheroes. And we're doing a cool conceptual design of it where there's circus and there's flying because they're superheroes. They got to fly.
They have to.
And then some really cool fight sequences. We have a phenomenal team. It's a really great rock musical by Lord's Lane. And they have a huge TikTok following and Instagram following because they've been releasing part of the music of the show. And people are really getting into it because it's beautiful. And so I'm excited to do that. And that's the kind of stuff that really gets me. It's not work. Like I could be in a theater doing that kind of work all day long and not get tired, not even think about sleeping. Because it's just exciting. It's passionate.
Has your hip replacements affected your trapeze at all? Are you still able to do it with your hip?
Oh,
with your
hip
hip
replacement and
replacements.
trapeze. Good
Yeah.
question. In theory, no. In theory, I won't be able to work at the intensity that I'm used to.
Okay.
In theory, the G forces from flying trapeze and swinging trapeze will pull the joint out. It's not
Ouch.
recommended. But I still could do small things. I can do aerial fabric and aerial rope. I can still climb. I've just been approved to play racquetball.
Woohoo.
I've been approved to swim and bike ride. So this is only 3 months since my surgery. So
Yeah.
really, I'm farther ahead than most people. My doctor was like, "You're so strong in general," that he literally he broke a sweat in the operating room trying to get my hip out, because it was just
Wow.
like, I'm rock
Yeah.
solid. I mean, I have muscle. That's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people that have had hip replacements because I used to work in the PT world, but I've never had a trapeze artist. So like, I didn't know if that was a thing you could do again or not.
Well, this is the thing. My email address, and I don't mind saying it, but my email address is "Why walk when you can fly," and that's also like my tagline for everything, because 9/11 happened and I had horrible PTSD, and a friend made me a CD of uplifting songs, and the very first song was "Why Walk When You Can Fly" by Mary Chapin Carpenter, and I put it in a CD alarm clock, and every day that first song woke me up, and it got me thinking, why walk when you can fly? And
There
now
you go.
now I have to think, oh, why fly when you can walk?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's a pivot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't do any aerial stuff for an entire year and a half. There wasn't access to it, nor was my body able to. I could barely walk
Yeah.
to the supermarket. Now that I'm on the other side of it, it's like I can dance again. I can tap dance again. Things that I haven't done in years. But I
That's
can
good
still
though.
design in circus. I can still teach. I
Yeah.
can still coach.
Yeah.
I can still spot with my upper body. So I'm not dead yet. But there are other things you can do in the circus. And then like another joy that came up during the pandemic was, well, it happened years before the pandemic, but I love stand-up comedy and I love impressions. And so I'd started doing singing impressions. I got really good at it and started doing open mics, and then eventually got paid to do stand-up. And during the pandemic,
Can't beat that.
I did a bunch of Zoom hosting events where I was the host and had to, just be like the Joan Rivers of the night.
Yeah, my
And
company hires those too.
yeah,
Like
hello.
because we can't go out and do our team meetings.
Right.
And like normally we like have like lunch and stuff and whatever, and it's bonding.
Yeah.
So, well, how do you do it over Zoom? Is basically we did like, Family Feud, and they would hire hosts
Yeah.
to be like fun and whatever.
I just did a podcast last Friday night. It's called Your Backup Plan. And it was a mimic of the Hollywood Squares. If you've ever watched Hollywood Squares in the 1970s, it was a game show. But the center square was always a stand-up comic or a very funny person. So it was either Paul Lynde, Bruce Valanche. There were always like these characters, Phyllis Diller for a while, so there were all these characters. So Tina, the host, asked me to be like the Paul Lynde character. So it's on YouTube. You can check it out. It's Your Backup Plan. And
so cool.
And so she interviewed, there were 9 of us that were in her podcast. She was celebrating her first year. So she did like this relaunch and gave everybody sort of a platform to be entertained. And
really cool.
So it was really fun. So that who knows what that's gonna bring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did a couple of voiceovers. I recorded in my bedroom, and we all have the use of Zoom. I can talk to somebody in Hawaii and somebody in Chicago at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's about utilize. God gives you lemons. Make limoncello tiramisu.
There you go.
Don't just make lemonade. Don't be a boring old shit.
So what is your favorite thing that you have ever done on Broadway out of all of the careers that you've done? What has been like your absolute favorite?
I have 2. I mean, obviously the Fish concert, which I just talked about, which you can see on YouTube, 2011 and 2018. The songs were Down with Disease, and the second year was Mercury. And though the stepping on stage at Madison Square Garden, where I saw my first concert, my very first concert, I was in the audience seeing the Village People in 1979 in that very venue. And here I am on the stage where I saw my first concert. So that was just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
The second was working on Broadway with the actress Andrea Martin from the musical Pippin. Now, Andrea Martin's a comedian. You know her from My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
eat meat, I'll make lamb. That's Andrea. So
Yes, love that one.
I love her.
Andrea won
do
the
too.
role as Bertha, the grandmother. And so she was 64 or 65 at the time when I trained her to do trapeze. She walked into my studio. We sat on the mats for an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, reading the lyrics and how she wanted this song to be a flashback. And you can see this on YouTube as well. It's called Just No Time at All. And in the middle of the song, she takes off her robe and she's wearing a beautiful circus costume. And she gets up on a double trapeze and still singing, does a double trapeze act in the middle of her number.
Oh my
and
gosh.
brings the house down, instant standing ovations every single night. She won a Tony Award for it. And she's
So awesome.
But what was so incredible about that experience was when you're in presence with somebody like that, like I get starstruck. The first time I worked with Liza Minnelli, I don't think she got a chance to talk. I literally sang with her, and I was, because I talk really fast because I really want to get everything out, because then she's going to be gone, and so with Andrea, she was just so down to earth that it became a ping pong match, and we were learning about each other. And then I started to get her in the air and teach her stuff, and she came to me for the physical movement. But what she actually taught me was the way that her acting mind works on this song, and how she masterfully broke it down. And again, she from start to finish, the second she enters the stage, you are just mesmerized. And it was a master class. And I didn't even know I was taking a master class. I thought I was being hired to train somebody. She trained me. And
I love it.
So I really, that in particular, that and teaching Rob McClure how to walk a tightrope would be a toss up. He's such an amazing actor, and just beautiful voice. He's playing Mrs. Doubtfire in the musical version of Mrs. Doubtfire right now.
I think I just saw an ad for that.
Yeah, that's Rob. So I taught him how to walk a tightrope.
So cool.
And that was my favorite experience, because when I got to do Chaplin, the opening night, I opened the playbill and my name was in the playbill. Now, when you're a young actor, kid coming from Pennsylvania to see a Broadway play, you open the playbill, you read all the credits that these people have. And one day you dream of opening a playbill and seeing your name. And I opened the playbill, and not only did I see my name, it's a tightrope trainer, and it had my full bio. And I was in seventh heaven, because that was really, like, I know it's a small thing, but it was such a huge thing for me as a kid from Pennsylvania. With, in Pennsylvania, my mother just wanted me to get married and work in a factory. That was they didn't want me to move to New York. None of my family wanted me to move to New York. They were like, we'll be back in a few days, but I had gotten a full scholarship to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. And that's where I cut my teeth theatrically. So I kind of had that training, but I loved New York. I loved being here. I loved the energy of it. And so yeah, that was where I really felt like I had made it, or at least had made it better than the people in college who I thought I would never be as good as. Like everybody else got lead roles in the college musicals, and I ended up playing the guy sweeping the stage, or have a one line thing. And here I am opening a playbill on Broadway with my name on it. And so even though it wasn't an acting role on Broadway, which can still happen, just putting it out there.
Yeah.
I did get to work with Jerry Mitchell. Jerry Mitchell is a Tony Award winning director, choreographer, and he has a quote, and I will never forget it. And it is, "Dreams do not have an expiration date." And so when it comes to pivots, my circus career may be over as far as the trapeze in the intensity that I was used to, but I can still dance, I can still sing, I can still make people laugh.
Well, and you can still do like the choreography, right, of what you're continuing working on and on Broadway that's coming up.
Absolutely. And that is, that's gold. And it's just, it sets you apart from everybody. Like I just got a call 2 weeks ago to audition for the Dementors in the Harry Potter play. And of course, I'm like, I just had hip replacement. I can't wear a harness. I would not be able to fly, sad, sorry. But then they called me. It is
sad.
I
love Harry Potter.
Yeah, I do too. But then they called me and they're like, well, would you like to audition for one of the standbys for the Ron Weasley character? And I'm like, yes. So I'm still waiting. So that, again,
I love that.
And if it happens, you guys will get tickets right away because I will send them.
Oh,
I want you in the front row. But
that would be awesome. We would love
that. Would be.
I don't want to.
I love Harry Potter.
We're not going to jinx it. We're going to manifest it for you. This is us manifesting it for you.
Yeah, manifest. There we go.
So should we expect any more books from you?
Well, the first book is published. Ship a Mama Says. It's on Amazon. It's a book of my mother's quotes and a small story about our life together in the last 5 years. But then Escape to Ravioli Mountain. I am in editing hell right now. So here's the thing. I'm not an editor, not a writer, not a chef, but I wrote a cookbook. So when you have those three things against you, you really have to.
You're in editing hell.
You're in editing hell. But I have a great support network. During the pandemic, one of my dear friends, we got so much closer. She lives literally 8 blocks away from my house, and she's an author, and she became a mentor. And she's really responsible for me really making my books happen. And, her name's Susie, and she's just incredible. And such an inspiration. And we would have socially distant cocktails in my garage during the pandemic. We would sit 6 feet apart. I open the garage door, and then I make all kinds of infused vodkas and infused alcohols. So every Sunday, I would open up the garage door, and it would be whatever the vodka du jour or whatever the cocktail du jour. I made a delicious pear and grape sangria.
I need to become your friend is all I have to say.
My friend. Are you kidding?
I need to come over. I need to get some cocktails because these all sound amazing. Homemade vodka? Give me some.
They're in the book. Infusing alcohol is the easiest thing on the planet. And it only takes 5 days and a Ziploc bag or a mason jar. You get cheap vodka, whatever's cheap and on sale. You put 2 cups of vodka and 6 tablespoons of zest, orange, lemon, grapefruit, whatever. And let it sit for 5 to 7 days, strain it, and you've got flavored vodka. You can do it with vanilla. You can do it with coffee.
Sounds good.
You can do it with chocolate. You can do it with cocoa nibs and peanut butter powder. You can make peanut butter vodka. So these are all in my book. The cookbook I hope will be out by Christmas. And that's my goal.
Will there be any more books after the cookbook, or are you going to be, it's editing hell, are you done?
No, because the joy of the writing is still there. Like I understand that. I have a point of view, so I'm not calling myself a writer, but I do know that I have a point of view. I have a lot of things to say. I have other ideas for books. Even the title, Why Fly When You Can Walk, is still sticking in my head. It could be some way to tie in my journey from trapeze artist to post-hip replacement and ways that could be helpful. I have a musical book that I'm working on about a love story that happens at Burning Man.
I love it.
So there's some couple of
That's
things
awesome.
that are stirring around that I'll always be a creative person. And somebody in a recent podcast called me the multi-hyphenated artist. And
isn't that the truth?
I am so into
that's a book title. That's a good book title too. The multi-hyphenated artist. That is your memoir book's title. I'm just saying.
There is actually a podcast called The Multi-Hyphenated Artist. And I just found that out too.
Okay. So you can't take it for a book.
Oh no, I can do it. If I can do it,
you can do it. Unless it's trademarked, you can absolutely use it.
Same thing. Now that I own the copyrights for Ravioli Mountain, no one can talk about Ravioli Mountain
and I love the title.
Well, here's the thing. If you write every single day, even if it's 10 minutes, I even when I was having my roughest times, I would just open the file and I would look at it. And there was a quote that I learned. I have to think about it, but it was a very important quote that made me think about procrastinating, because we procrastinate because we're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed with the idea of editing. So I push my book aside sometimes and don't look at it. But what I had to do was really sit down and focus, even 10 minutes a day, do one thing a day towards your goal of the book, whether it's one chapter, one recipe, one story, otherwise you get lost in the shuffle, and you look at it and it's like, I can't even look at it. It's too much. There's too much for me to do. And I won't be able to achieve that in this. So I'll remember the quote, but it's basically that
when you lay down in bed tonight to go to sleep, you'll remember.
I'll text you. I'll text you both at like 3:00 in the morning.
And I've never been to New York, so now I have more excuses to come to New York.
There you go.
Exactly. So we can go get drinks with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or you come to my garage and I'll make you something. Martini is my favorite.
Ooh, yeah. I love a good chocolate martini.
Homemade. Yeah.
I have one last question. Sure. What advice would you give our listeners?
Couple of things. Every single day, find a way to laugh. Because if you're laughing, you're breathing. Breathing brings comfort. It also helps release endorphins. No matter if your heart is breaking, laugh. Find a way to laugh. Watch stand-up comedy, watch a funny movie, do something that will give you a chuckle. And I swear to you, your life will get better. And also, life gives you lemons. Don't make lemonade, limoncello, tiramisu. And the thing, when you work in theater, you get to meet and sometimes work with your heroes. And for me, one of my heroes was Chita Rivera, and she's phenomenal, amazing dancer, actress, personality. And she said to me about working in theater, Bobby, don't be in theater because of the money, because there isn't any. Be in it because you love it and because you're willing to put in the work to make your art. And if it turns out that you can make money off of it, great, but do it because you love it. And those are the advice. And also the Jerry Mitchell quote, dreams don't have an expiration date. So if you have a dream and you want to make it happen, manifest it like we were talking about earlier, dreams don't have an expiration date.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you, Bobby, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been fun. Had a good time. It's a good Saturday.
Yeah. And thank you for waking up so early, Rieta.
It's no
Hawaii
problem.
Time. So thank you. And thanks for having me. And email me your mailing address and I'll send you guys one of the books.
Oh, we would love that.
Of course. I'll send you shit my mama says.
I love it.
Yeah.
So this is How to Deal When Shit Gets Real. Don't forget a new episode every Friday. Don't forget to rate and review us, and we'll see you guys next time.